Morning, good afternoon, colleagues. We will start shortly. Just give a couple of minutes to other colleagues. Right. Welcome everyone. I think we can start. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Thanks for joining us today on this webinar, Systemic Solutions for Local Growth, Catalonia's Bioeconomy Sector Construction. My name is Joan Fernandez. I'm the Global Innovation Advisor of the Strategic Innovation Unit. Welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenue to this new edition of our series of webinars, Global Innovation Series, where we try to get participants with stories that are interesting on the field of innovation and systems transformation. I'm very glad to have participants from across the UNDP Global Innovation Network tuning in.
I lost Sean.
Did we lose Sean? Apologies, colleagues. Just let's wait a minute for Sean to get his connection back.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yes.
Okay. So sorry about that.
No worries.
So I was saying, if you will, please state who you are. In today's session, it's an opportunity to have a conversation into a compelling case of systemic transformation, and particularly how to make happen economic and societal change with a frame on ecology through a systems approach. The case that we will see today is the bioeconomy sector in Catalonia, that is part of Spain. And this initiative exemplifies how governments can adopt systems change methodologies to unlock local growth and create inclusive economic ecosystems. We are very grateful to have Victor Falguera with us. He is the General Coordinator of the Bioeconomy Hub of Catalonia, who will share with us his insights into how Catalonia has been able to apply transformative innovation and systems thinking methodologies to build a thriving bioeconomic ecosystem in this region. We will learn how Catalonia has effectively applied transformative innovation, experiments, and system change methodologies to build this sector. Originally, we also counted with another participant, Teresa, from the Diputación of Lleida, but for a cause of force majeure, she cannot join with us today. So this case is very interesting because at UNDP, we work with governments and other actors to design policies and programs for sustainable development. We think that this lesson from Catalonia can be very valuable and particularly demonstrate how experimental systemic approaches can lead to both impactful, scalable, and also resilient solutions for a better economy and a better relation with the environment. Particularly, this case is interesting when we talk about sectors such as bioeconomy that sits in the intersections between agriculture, local development, finance, transportation, etc. How can you create a new economic sector that is in the intersection of so many sectors? Later on the session, we will also have another colleague from UNDP, Igor Isotov, from the Republic of North Macedonia, who will join the conversation as a discussant, bringing his own experiences in applying similar approaches to design and implement a portfolio on bio-waste in North Macedonia. And we will end, of course, giving you the opportunity to participate and interact with the guests in a QA session. Please use the chat at any point in time to ask your questions. Now, let's go with the presentation of our first guest, Mr. Victor Falguera. As I said before, he is the General Coordinator of the Bioeconomy Hub of Catalonia. Victor will share his insights on how this journey of socioeconomical and technological transformation has been carried out in the last years. So, Victor, thank you so much. Gracias for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, the entire NDP team for having us on board. It's a pleasure for us. We always try to share what we are doing. I don't think that listening to your introduction, Sean, very kind introduction. Thank you for that. But I wouldn't say that we have already done all of these kind of things, because you know that these processes or systems change are really complex. And the thing is that in all these kind of processes, we need to admit from the beginning that this will always be an ongoing situation. So this is an endless process. And one of the things on complexity that we have in all these kind of processes is acknowledging that it's an endless situation. So we will go on improving, developing mechanisms to foster this systems change. What I'm going to share with you today in just a few minutes is the entire story that led to the development of the Lleida Shared Agenda. The Lleida Shared Agenda is the specific methodology that we are using to implement this systems thinking towards systems change and systems transformation. And of course, the shared agendas entail complex mechanisms of being built in itself, and also develop and create and adapt the governance that these kind of methodologies entail. And I'm going to try to keep it on a very practical way, so as the colleagues that are joining us in this webinar can get some practical insights. Those of you that are more into the theory of these kind of things probably will find that the definitions or the way in which I am using certain concepts are not specifically accurate to the theory. And it's okay for us, because we try to be practitioners. So at a certain point, which I'm going to explain later, we discovered about the theory behind this kind of processes and system change, okay? But when we started long ago in 2017, we were just trying to find a way to manage all of these problems that we had in a very rural territory, and we started from the point of knowing that no one has the capacity to face this kind of challenges by themselves, nor the little farmers, of course, but not the public administration itself, not the big companies playing in that area. This was a kind of thing in which we need to work together. But then working together doesn't mean specifically trying to be all together in each one of the steps that we are working along the path, okay? And I will try to do in these minutes a brief explanation of the story, but giving you some of the key learnings that we've had so far. Thinking of the fact that if you are interested in attending this webinar, probably is because at some point you are thinking of applying or adapting this kind of methodologies in your own region. And this is, as I'm going to refer at the end of the presentation, one of the things that I am most interested in, knowing in which regions you are trying to do the same kind of work and apply and adapt the same kind of methodologies. So going straight to the point, I'm going to review briefly the starting point when it all began back in 2017, which is the land in which we are working. And as you see, we have defined, looking backwards, 3 different phases. And in each one of these 3 phases, we've had a certain kind and number of actors working together in this action or in this kind of action, and also specific goals and specific mechanisms to deploy the strategy. Okay, so in the first phase, it was really focused on trying to know our own territory, and that's the fact, and that's we need a lot of effort in the first step, just trying to define what are we trying to do and who is doing what in the initial phase. When we are trying to adapt this methodology, not being too much ambitious in the first step is always a good piece of advice. Okay, and I would keep really, really simple in the first step as a first piece of advice. And then we had a major change when we gathered the engagement, strong engagement of the different levels of the public administration. This was a key milestone for us. Everything changed so far, and then we could start implementing or defining the things to be done in specific priority areas that we had defined before. Okay, and in the third phase, as you are going to see, we are planning this third phase to scale up things at a different level from next year onwards, based on the strength that we have gathered so far nowadays until the end of 2024. So just to give you a little bit of context, what is a shared agenda? A shared agenda is a long-term strategic agreement that needs to find the alignment between the local challenges and the global opportunities. And this is because we need to take advantage of everything that we have on the table to really implement the projects and the measures that will allow us to walk the path towards transformation. Okay, this is the theoretical framework. I assume that most of you already know this theory. What I'm trying to explain today is how we are applying this at very, very practical level. We will talk after working the discussion perhaps about this niches identification and how to build this risk-controlled environment, this protective environment for the niches to be nurtured and to allow them to upscale and join together to push together to these systems deployment and transformation. But first of all, I need you to understand also how things were evolving in the upscale of the territorial scope and at territorial level. What happened when we started experimenting on the concept on how we can solve our challenges together, and realizing that at a certain point, the territorial framework in which we were working was not enough. We didn't have capacity to move in practical terms. So things went on upscaling, and at a certain point, we managed to reach some levels of governance at territorial level, and some other tools that we are using today, one of which the Catalan Bioeconomy Hub, which I currently coordinate, that are structures at Catalan level, so at regional level. But the economic transformation, the territorial scope at which we are trying to work in changing the systems is below that, is at the NUTS 3 level in European statistics terminology. And what did we do in this step? First of all, as I'm going to show you in a few minutes, we started by identifying the challenges that we had in certain villages with a very intensive farming model that is not sustainable. And the first point perhaps is acknowledging that we cannot go on for the next 25, 30 years doing the business as usual, so the things in the economic system in the exact way that we are doing so far, because this entails problems, this entails challenges, and this entails lack of sustainability, not only from the environmental perspective, but also from the economic and social perspective. And this means that in the province of Lleida, we are losing population. As in a lot of rural areas throughout the world, we are losing population. And this has a number of reasons, but the first thing is identifying which are these reasons in our specific territory. Here, as you see, we were upscaling the processes, engaging a lot of different actors along the way, and defining specific projects once we had this Northern Star, this shared future vision in which we agree. And by we, I don't mean looking for consensus. This is a very important thing to understand. If you are trying to manage this kind of processes in any single region in the world, we talk in these methodologies of coalitions of the willing, not of searching for consensus. Searching for consensus is impossible, and up to a certain point, if you think of the words that we find in the theory, has no sense at all, because we all know that systems try to protect themselves. Systems are reluctant to change. Systems have a lot of mechanisms just to avoid change. So if we look for consensus on the practical way, we are not going to move from where they are, from what we are, in fact. Okay. So the thing is that this kind of minimum agreement needs to find the minimum level to have enough capacity just to move forward. And on practical terms, there will be a lot of people not engaging the process at the beginning because they are part of the system that we need to change. But we do need to engage them at a certain point on the process. Don't worry, this will happen. The main advice here is once you have the minimum capacity to move forward, just start moving. And then things will end up joining pieces together, okay? I will, perhaps we will share the presentation later, but to give you a brief idea, we are working in the Lleida territory, which is the greatest one, and so the biggest one, and the most depopulated one in Catalonia, with a trend of ongoing depopulation. We have the most of the primary production and a low level of industry in our territory. So in this challenge, we needed to find at first solutions for this challenge. And at that point in 2017, 2018, we noticed that the documents of the European Commission starting to define the next framework program from 21 to 27 started developing this concept of two main pillars, which are a smarter Europe, a greener Europe. And if we combine these two pillars, bioeconomy was indeed a very, very strong lever to push both pillars forward. So this was a huge opportunity. Bioeconomy is a huge opportunity for rural rebels because by definition, we concentrate in rural areas most of the raw materials that are the basis for bioeconomy value chains. So at some point, we were trying to just make the stakeholders see how we were going to transform the main problem of the territory towards a main opportunity for this territory. And this took a lot of work. We started joining people, a group of 25, 30 people in these 8 initial small villages trying to define this Northern Star. We wouldn't say it that way at that point. We didn't know even of the concept, of the methodology, of the theory behind that. We were just experimenting on how to build a collaborative governance to move forward and to change this system without knowing this at that point. And we started by doing some things that nowadays we can find in a lot of bioeconomy strategies throughout the world, which is identifying the bioresources that we have and the potential value chain that might be developed upon these bioresources. And we had a very strong stakeholder here, which is very unique association of 150 families that have put already a lot of investment on the table just to create these mechanisms that are actually transforming the system and making things doing things in a very, very different way to that business as usual. We started pushing forward through moving to, we were listed as one of the case studies for the European Network for Rural Development in terms of bioeconomy deployment. And at that point, honestly, we had just joined the people to talk together, and that's it. Just trying to define what do we want our territory to be in the future. And this is the definition of the Northern Star of this shared future vision, but we didn't even know that at that point. So things started to move very fast until 2019, because we gathered the support of the different levels of the public administration. We started to deploy projects at different levels. We were starting to experiment on one very, very important concept on all this. When we have a little bit of idea of how to manage the governance of all this, you acknowledge that you have the Northern Star, you have the route from what we are today towards this future situation, and this route, you acknowledge that you need a lot of people working together, and the unit of action are projects, regulation changes, training sessions or programs, a lot of things together. But each one of these projects or initiatives, which we can associate to these little arrows at the bottom of the multi-level perspective diagram, okay, needs to be implemented by different actors and need to be funded through different mechanisms, okay? And this is very important because that taught us a lot of things on the practical way. Once we had agreed on this shared future vision, we started to describe the path, okay? So we know where we are, we know where we want to go. The next thing is describing the route from one place to another, and that led to identifying the main priority areas, which is this thing that you have here in the three, okay? And then starting to work in groups and to deploy these mechanisms to a more specific ways of thinking. In the second phase, we started to work together with the deployment of the strategies. It was very, very important for us, the deployment of the smart specialization strategy. And the practical thing is that the next version of the smart specialization strategy, which is the current one, acknowledges the shared agendas as the main pillar of the methodology for reaching its goals, okay? So we've started experimenting with the previous framework. So this is another lesson that we learn. Start from what you have. Don't try to reach the impact to influence the development of a strategy and then have the mechanisms to get started in deploying specific projects. Take advantage of what you have and then move forward. And from then on, things went to a different level, gathering strategies and gathering strategic agreements at different levels. A consolidation of the governance structure at two levels. This is very important. We do need one institutional level and one technical level, because when you need the institutional agreement and when you need the technical work are not the same moment in time. In fact, it's very different. So it's a very good thing to have both levels clearly identified and the people participating at both levels clearly identified. And just to give you a brief overview of this is where we are. What we are trying to do now, and tomorrow we have an important meeting for that, is engaging the people with the capacity of funding the projects from the private perspective, okay? So we're trying to transform things and we are gathering different kinds of support, but we are defining the project, we are co-creating and co-developing the projects with a lot of participation. Someone needs to manage that, okay? And this is also a good part of the job that I will be more than happy to talk after that, okay? And abusing of Joan's patience, just 1 minute, and in a very practical level, I am quite sure that we can share this presentation with all the attendants. And what I did here is just giving some practical recommendations based on a project that we are implementing now called Prime. Here's the link to the project, in which we are trying to start adapting the methodology in other 4 regions in Europe, in Finland, Italy, Ireland, and Portugal, starting from scratch. Okay, so we have learned a lot of things, but now we are trying to start from scratch in other regions. So what we are trying to do is giving a different view of the multi-level perspective about this. How can we use this kind of methodologies to align the top-down perspective, and that is the strategic framework, mainly bioeconomy strategies, national and regional, and smart specialization strategies, and all the related strategies, for example, climate action plans, for strategies, food sector strategies, and so on, okay, with the bottom-up perspective. And this is the demands linked to the specific territory, okay, because we are already acknowledging, all of us, that the mission-oriented policies translate into a lot of research outputs, but not in social and economic impact. How are we going to change that? Through these mechanisms. And here you have this more formal and easy to follow roadmap that I just explained for our case, but translated. This is material from the project that we are editing this same week, okay, to be applied in the other regions with a specific guidelines and recommendations on how to apply this movement from number 1, where we are, number 2, where we want to go, number 3, how are we going to move from the first point towards the second. Okay, thank you for your patience, and more than happy to answer any kind of question that you have.
Not at all, Victor. Thank you for your exposition. Not only has been clear, but been to the point of pointing out which are the drivers of change, which are the practical lessons that you got, right. Before handing over and introducing Igor, I would like to highlight some of the comments that you make, right. First, starting for knowing where you are and what you need. Also, that theory comes after the practice, or you learn the theory after the practice, or you see the relevance of the theory after the practice. The importance of creating a vision of the future that is shared with a coalition of different actors, but not necessarily, and I think one of the most interesting points, not necessarily built on consensus, but on a minimum agreement of different actors playing different roles. Create that vision, if I understood well your presentation, also not around the problems or the difficulties, but around an opportunity. That is a joint opportunity. That the revolution is sometimes that people is in the same room talking, right? That's the real innovation sometimes. That different actors have to have different functions on the system, and also that the timing and the pace of the different actors, it cannot be the same, right? Institutions, more in a political administrative level, move to a direction, technicians, officers move to a different level, private sector move to a different level, so you also have to dance with the system. So thank you so much. I think it's now time to present Igor. We want to reflect a little bit on his experience. Igor is a colleague from the Accelerator Labs, temporarily based in India, but from North Macedonia. And we want to discuss with Igor and give him the opportunity to ask you some questions, Victor, about how systems transformations played on your own case, and reflect maybe on some convergences and divergences from your own experience, Igor. So thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
You're muted, Igor.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Victor. So as you mentioned, my name is Igor Izotov. I come from North Macedonia Acceleration Labs team. Right now I'm positioned on a DA in India. I'm so glad to see colleagues joining this call from both my home country, hello Anna, and Ashish from the head of the ACE team here. the biggest and the most innovative portfolio, as well as Rosita in the Istanbul Regional Hub, and many friends, Juan and Parima and everybody else who I see after a long time. In the previous 4.5 years, I'll first start with none of the team who worked on the bio-waste portfolio is a biotechnician or knew anything about biotechnologies 4 years ago. We started with it, exploring the system within the city of Skopje to see if transformation on a city level can be achieved. Our first successes or breakthroughs were that together with the Faculty of Technology and Metallurgy, we are based on the Eastern European system, we don't call it Faculty of Biotechnology still, we managed to transform and create the first phase valorization indexes for citrus, coffee, and leftovers. When you're saying phase valorization, we mean the formulas how to transform it in a cascade system. What's the most valuable product that you can get? For example, I'll give you a short example. There's a company in Macedonia in a small town that basically produces eggs. With the egg leftovers, they throw it out, and they don't throw it away, but they produce electricity. If you ask a scientist, he tells you this is the biggest mistake you can do because the eggshells are full with some vitamins which are good in dental industry, and you can sell them for millions of dollars per milligrams. But everybody are applauding this company that they're zero waste company. So that's how important base valorization index. Then we continued exploring with the waste audits to see how much waste is created in Horace sector and the city of Skopje. What we found out, a simple formula, it costed a lot of money, but to get this formula to prove that the system works, looked like this. So half a ton of citrus leftovers is done by a region of the city of Skopje called Debar Malo, where you can go for a drink or for a nice dinner. If you transform that in essential oils, in the cascade system, remember the base valorization index, in the cascade system, essential is the simplest thing you can do. It's like alcohol distillation, but it's traded on the stock exchanges, essential oils from orange. It created a value of around $22, if I'm not mistaken, having in mind all the other equipments that you need to buy for transformation. You're creating a value in the system of around $14, right? What's happening right now in the system? People are, or Horace sector is just throwing the citrus leftovers. They're not seeing bio-waste as a resource. So what we envisioned at that point, together with experts, one of the leading experts, I think from Spain, and that will be connected with many of the questions I'll follow up after my introduction to Victor, is we created this blueprint, and a year later we established the first biohacking lab, I think, in all Eastern European part of the world, where scientists, entrepreneurs, young people can experiment, I'll call mingle with bio-waste and biotechnologies in order to transform it and to make products. Till now, I'll go a little bit in outputs now. Why the establishment of the biohacking lab proved a lot of concept that a system can be changed from scratch. We started from scratch. I didn't know anything about biotechnologies. Not many people were talking about bio-waste or bio-waste transformation in the country prior to this intervention. So we did a startup challenge somewhere last year. The second winning team, we created artificial skin out of kombucha leftovers. Pretty nice piece, an MVP product, minimum viable product. They went out to form a company, 3 young graduate students, 2 of them biotechnicians, 1 mechanical engineers. They got investment around 100K, which is $93,000, which for a country as ours is a huge investment. And when you're 22, 23, that proves a concept. The winning team actually dissolved, the idea dissolved, they didn't continue. Then we did like two and a half, I'll call interventions with the private sector, showcasing bio-waste as a resource for another industry, we call it. Opening door so companies can understand that they can transform their own bio-waste systems. And I'm still remembering a person from a hotel, from Hilton Hotel, and I'm finishing, I'm singing the bell, I'm hearing the bell. He said, like, you want to tell me that what everything is done in the kitchen and the leftovers in the kitchen can be transformed through using this machine? and then put in the hotel rooms as essentials. I said like, yeah, basically, yes, it's so simple. So basically with these small interventions, we try to influence the system to work without us, because we as a UNDP, as a development organization, put these rotors, I call them like self-propelling rotors within the system, and check which of this system works the best, which of the rotors has the biggest impact on the system. Call it the portfolio approach. Somebody calls the portfolio approach. So I think with these interventions, we kind of started a small but impactful revolution around the city of Skopje. And I always say that one of the mottos is that we should promote it more as a city of biotechnologies. Recently, like 2 months ago, and that's our mistake from UNDP, we also created the first souvenir entirely created from the biowaste that the city of Skopje makes. So the public enterprises which are under the city of Skopje. So we got like a really nice, there is an old clock in the city of Skopje because of the devastating earthquake 60 years ago. So we created fully the souvenir. However, we came to realization that the city needs to replicate it in the biohacking lab using students. So we didn't replicate it. So there's like a couple of MVPs only of that souvenir. I think I consider that a success. However, that we didn't replicate it with another intervention, that's a different point of discussion. But this still intervention, private sector, startups, young innovators, arts, because I'm considering the souvenir as art, prove that the system can be changed. And I'm finishing with a sentence which I'm asking all the time. People who are trying to, what's biotechnology? I told them as simple, if you follow all the trends, if I asked a person in the 1970s, how does a person working with a computer look like? Most probably it will be a white person in a white coat in some lab, right? In MIT, in Harvard, closed environment. If I ask a person now, what does a person look like who works in a biosafety level 2 lab, which basically the biohacking lab of Skopje is? Again, they'll tell me the same thing, but it's just machines. We need just now how to use the machines and transform bio-waste and use biotechnologies for the common good. And I think right?
Thank you so much, Igor, for this very quick introduction to your work on Skopje. What questions arise in you after the exposition of Victor? Which points of convergence, which point of divergence you see with your own story that I understand that is more limited in time and in scope, considering these factors? What do you think that relates and diverges?
Something which comes to mind, like when we started the whole exploration around on bio-waste, we mapped basically all the Horizon 2020, and Horizon 2020 is the innovation platform of the European Commission, right? In total, there were like $900+ million invested in bio-waste, out of which co-financing is 200 million, 700 million directly from the budget of the European Commission. Leading country is Spain, right? Spain is leading in research in biotechnologies. However, leading countries in startups is Denmark and UK. So I don't understand that disparity, and that's something which has been bugging me for quite some time. So Victor, if you can explain it, and in your system design where, if you made any mistakes, or how to involve more people like the Danish did. You're leading in research, however, you're lacking in startups and this startup activity and businesses formulation around it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Igor. This is a common gap that we all have in all sectors when transforming research into development and into business. And I think that the simplest way to understand is thinking of the TRL, the technology readiness levels, from 1 to 9, which I assume that almost everyone knows that scale. So up to TRL 6, which is more or less pilot plant, okay, pilot plant scale, you have a lot of mechanisms to support this development. And research is a lower TRL from 1, 2, 3, 4. to put it that way, okay? Even slightly upon that, from 4 to 6, you also have a lot of mechanisms, and you mentioned the European programs, and these are pretty big ones, okay, to reach funding and protection mechanisms, to put it in the systems change theory words. But when you overcome successfully the pilot plant scale, there's a desert in terms of mechanisms of support. And one interesting thing, you just mentioned the Danish framework. I have spent a lot of time visiting different countries and regions in Europe, leading regions in particularly doing this in deploying bioeconomy at commercial level. Okay, one of the countries that I specifically visited last year was Denmark. And I was at a specific entity, visiting a specific entity, very big one in Denmark, and I put that scale of TRLs in the screen in my presentation, and I explained that we had identified this very strong gap, and we were trying to implement mechanisms to overcome this gap. And the people at that institution in Denmark started laughing. And I said, okay, I was terribly wrong. I don't know where. And they said, no, just finish your explanation, and we are going to show you something later. When I finished my explanation, they did their presentation, and they placed in the screen just the same scheme, but with different colors. Okay, so we all came to the same conclusion. So even in Denmark, it's true, they are leading the commercial upscale and development, but they have already identified this. The difference is that the mechanisms that they are using, and they're to keep it simple, they're placing a very, very strong bet on mechanisms to overcome this gap at this level. Okay, in Spain, I would say that we have a lot of work to do in bridging this gap from TRL 6 to TRL 8, and this is particularly hard to do in industrial terms, because you know that innovative processes are very tech specific. So the mechanisms of sharing facilities to upscale processes is a very hard thing to do. We are trying to do it in a very tight topic inside the food sector to help companies share facilities in overcoming this gap. Okay, but to me, this is the difference. And if you take a look at how the innovation supporting environments work along the world, the most successful ones have found mechanisms to overcome this gap, because a lot of even successful projects die at this scale.
Thank you so much, Victor. Maybe we open some of the questions that the audience is dropping. One that it was the question that I was about to ask you anyway is, how do you measure success in building a bioeconomy sector? Are there a specific indicators that have been particularly meaningful in tracking progress? And let me complement with my own reflection, right? When you normally are evaluating or measuring the success of a program, of a project, you have a look to the past, right? We had a couple of assumptions, we had a plan, we have a number of KPIs. If they were fulfilled or not, the program is successful. However, we are talking about a journey into the future with a lot of uncertainty, right? So what kind of mechanisms to measure success do you use, also considering that real systems transformation can take a decade or two, but you need results because you move in a context with political priorities that have short cycles, private sector priorities that have even shorter cycles, expectation from the population, etc. So how do you manage measuring and learning on your
This is a really good point, because we also need to change this mental framework. And you almost said that in your question. But the thing is that we usually set KPIs from the beginning. But this kind of processes start from acknowledging that identifying even the value chains in which we need to work is a part of the process. And that made me really uncomfortable at the beginning. At the beginning, I think that it will be really easy to understand for everybody. I worked as a consultant, who was one of many actors engaged in this process. At a certain point in the beginning, a company, an association hired me for driving these first participation processes. And I was very uncomfortable because I didn't have the answers for the questions that I was asked in that sessions. Okay, at that point, when you work as a consultant, you are supposed to be hired because you have answers. Okay, but in this kind of processes, you need to acknowledge that you won't have all the answers. Even in most cases, you don't know which are the questions. Okay. So how can we define KPIs when we don't even know the right questions to be asked? Okay, so we need, first of all, you were right. And one thing, very important thing that we need to change is the time scale. Okay, transformation is a long process, never-ending process, but we do need to see if we are advancing or not, if we are meeting this right direction. So I would say the right point to establish minimum KPIs is once you have defined the shared future vision, because you have the Northern Star, and then you can draw the route, and then map the route and start to see if you are going towards this direction or not. Okay, I would refer to the work of the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, TIPSI. They have established the transformative outcomes scale, 12 transformative outcomes that are a really good guide to understand this change in how we establish KPIs. And another concept from TIPSI that is really interesting on that is the formative evaluation. So we do evaluation not just for seeing if the projects have to be paid or not, but for learning on our own process and changing the ways in which we are approaching the next step. Just on the other side of the scale, a good point is that we are focusing most of the transformation in the data area on bioeconomy. We have 7 priority areas, 2 of which refer to bioeconomy. And bioeconomy is a very broad concept. So the progress towards implementation of bioeconomy can be achieved through a lot of different ways. So we have we have certain general KPIs that we might use and monitor from time to time to see classical KPIs, I mean, okay? And one good example to me is the latest Finnish bioeconomy strategy. In this prime project, what I am doing personally right now is studying these overlapping sections between the strategic framework in each region, and particularly by the national and regional bioeconomy strategies and the smart specialization strategies. And the Finnish bioeconomy strategy in its latest version says, we are not interested anymore in volume, but in value added. And then it's very specific in what do we understand by value added and how are we going to measure value added. And this is a nice thing to be very clear and specific in terms of defining the KPIs.
Super. Another question from the audience, this related to the coalitions. Regarding the governance model for this type of work, when you look back, is there anything different that you would have done to build these coalitions?
What's not different when looking back? Yes, of course. I have explained this 100 times, but at the beginning, we didn't even know what we were doing. And that's it. And that's the reality. We just realized that we needed to make things different. Okay. So we start by engaging. Let me give you a specific example. In terms of managing pig slaughter, which was and still is a very big problem in the region. Okay. We had the farmers that were pushing the most for doing something about this problem, saying we have invested a lot of money in potential solutions. And either way, they didn't work, or when they work, the Catalan government didn't allow us to apply the solutions due to a number of reasons that have to do with regulation, okay? And our first answer was, okay, if that's the problem, let's change the framework. Don't develop the solution and then later go to the government for the permitting of applying this solution. Let's take the people in charge in the Catalan government and sit on the table from the beginning before developing the solution, okay? And let's be a part of the group working in developing the solution. And this is how we started the engagement process. Now, what I shared with you is the latest and simplest possible version on how to get started in the engagement process. And I am now these days trying to write this down from all of our expertise, just to allow all the other regions in which we are working in the Prime project to start from scratch. And let me go even one step backwards. In this case, this is a European project, and our local partner in each one of these regions are sometimes technology centers, and the people involved are researchers, okay? And you know what I mean. So researchers are very used to work in a very, very specific framework, and making them understand the value in applying these very, very hard processes, because this takes a lot of times. You go always, these are iterative processes. You go 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, and you think that you have a certain level of engagement from important actors, and then you see these actors doing just the opposite at the next day, and these things happen, and you are tempted to get rid of all these and go back to business as usual 100 times along the way. This is very hard. Okay, so we are developing very easy to understand mechanisms to make people understand the value behind that. Okay, and this is where the engagement project starts. And I would say that at a practical level, let me refer to these 2 triangles that we are trying to align. Okay, so the top-down perspective and the bottom-up perspective. This strategic framework analysis is very useful, because what we are trying to do with our colleagues in these different regions is letting them see the opportunities unfold by this overlapping of their strategic framework, not ours here in Catalonia, but there in their own regions. And they see that there are a lot of opportunities in their own region that they didn't even know that they existed. Okay, so I would say that when we try to get started, obviously the public administration among the 5 LECs to be engaged is a very, very important one, because it's the one responsible for putting the means on the table, the most important means on the table to get started. Later on, you need the industry, you need the private sector sharing the aims. And to finish the answer, we don't have to talk to people in this engagement process, giving them the idea of putting more work on the table, okay? We need to understand which is their vision for the future, which are their own objectives. And all of this is based on building a network of trust for allowing all the individual engaged actors to reach their own goals. And we need them to understand that their own goals can be aligned with the common territorial goals. Otherwise, it's impossible, because none of us want more work than the work that we have on our day-to-day, okay? Not the public administration, not a single company, not a single farmer, okay? So we first need to understand which is their own goals, and then aligning these own goals and make them understand that if we work together, their own goals, not only the collective goals, their own objectives can be reached faster.
Okay. I wanted to do a follow-up question that it was if it's easy to understand, to admit ignorance, and we don't know what we are doing in this context, even internally. But I want to close with a final question from the audience, because we are running out of time. But I think this question is key. What advice would you give to governments in other regions interested in adopting a similar approach to economic transformation? Which are the requirements or the prerequisites? In one of your latest slides, you talk a little about it, but what is the number one advice, the number one requirement that some region, some city, all over the world who wants to go into this journey has to follow?
First thing is making an effort in understanding this, understanding the value in applying these kind of methodologies. Otherwise, I say that the process is hard. It's really hard. There's a lack of trust towards any government in any place in the world from the other kinds of actors. And this is the reality everywhere in the world. I don't know every single government that is 100% trusted and respected by their population. This is the starting point. So we are providing mechanisms to make things happen at the practical level. And this needs dedicated people. Okay? This needs dedicated people because there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do, first of all, in detecting leadership, in building these networks of trust, these coalitions of the willing, in identifying. We just answered a question about engagement, but first of all, you need to know who to engage, okay? And who needs to be engaged. And if we want to build this coalition of the willing, at the very first step is made of what we say the advocacy group. And the advocacy group is a reduced group of people, a small group of people made of influence leaders. Okay, this farmer that buys a certain piece of equipment, and at the other year, all the farmers around him have bought the same piece of equipment. This kind of people, when you arrive to a village and you go to the bar to have a drink, and you ask, okay, who is here the leader of opinion? And this happens in companies, this happens in the governments, this happens in universities and research centers, and this has nothing to do with the entity. This is a personal quality, okay? So we need to identify these people. And just from the perspective of the government, this is the number one. We need dedicated people to this kind of processes. And obviously, if you push for implementing this, it's because you believe that. I'm going to give you one brief example. In the government of Catalonia, in applying the smart specialization strategy, the department in charge, which is the economy department, has an area called the transformative innovation area. And this is responsible for having one person working in all the other departments of the government, working together. This is in innovation management. Those of you that know basic innovation management, this is what we call tiger teams in project management. So you take the person from different places from their day-to-day, and they don't report anymore to the head of the department, but to the head of the project, okay? So the Catalan government is doing this inside the public administration. So this is just an example of how to manage these kind of things. And when I explain this to other regional governments, they say, okay, we have no idea how to implement this, because you know that the public administration is really tight and it's hard to move things within. But this is a nice example, I think.
Yeah, no, indeed it is, and relates a lot of the work that we are doing in system portfolios. So unfortunately, time is up. We have one minute left. We don't want to consume more of your time, Victor. Thank you. It's been really great and a pleasure. We will try to distribute the presentation with the group. Thanks also to Igor for sharing about the experience in North Macedonia and his questions and comments. And thanks to all of you, to all the audience. Thanks for your questions, particularly in a busy period of the year. If you're interested to know more, to connect with Victor or Igor, just let us know. I think this example helped us a lot to understand how can we promote, from a system transformation point of view, economic development, right? So thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
Thank
See
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.